Welcome to the Dynon channel, your video source for information, education, and training on Dynon Avionics' industry-leading line of integrated avionics for experimental amateur-built and light sport aircraft. Today's topic, tech tips, installing an Autopilot servo limiting bracket.
Hi, I'm David Weber and welcome to Dynon Avionics Tech Tip video series. In this video we're going to talk about the proper installation of the servo limiting bracket. Let's get started. As always, I'd like you to gather up the tools you need. For this particular installation task, all you simply need is a number 2 Phillips screwdriver, a black permanent marker, Sharpie, some masking tape, and of course your servo limiting bracket installation kit. Okay, the first thing I'd like to establish is that you have already installed your control surface properly, that control surface is hitting the aircraft hard stops. Those are the stops that limit the range of motion of that control surface. It's been dialed in and you've met the specification of the kit manufacturer. Okay, this is very important because the servo limiting bracket is not used to control or limit the surface range, the range of motion on those control surfaces. Okay, that is done by the aircraft hard stops. The servo limiting bracket simply restricts the amount of range that the servo can go through so that we're not going over center. This is very important. I know that it sounds like a small detail, but it's very important that you understand that the aircraft has its surface control stops and that the servo has a limiting bracket that is simply a safety device. Okay? We'll talk about over center in a little bit and I'll give you a little demonstration on that. What I have right here is an RV7 aileron bracket and a servo attached to it. This is the bell crank off of an RV7, and of course I don't have the aircraft hard stops, mainly because I don't have an aircraft attached to this. So we're going to use our imagination a little bit. First thing I need you to do is to sort of center that aircraft control to where you think it might be, okay? And after you've done that, you can take your Sharpie and apply a piece of masking tape right here on the servo and mark that center. Now that we've got that center marked, we can go ahead and look at installing our limiting bracket. Now the limiting bracket comes with this wonderful little warning about not using longer screws. We do that because if you do use a longer screw and you penetrate inside this servo too far, you're going to end up damaging the circuit board that's inside of here. You damage that circuit board, it's going to cost you some money to get it repaired. I don't want to see that happen, okay? So be very careful. If you do not use the supplied screws, you have to go with a longer screw, that you don't go deep inside of here and contact that PCB board, okay? All right, so we now have established where we think the center of the arm rotation is when we're controlling the aircraft surface, okay? From this point, we can now sort of estimate where that limiting bracket would have to go. Now I want to point out that there is an orientation to this bracket. You can see here that we've got a very square surface here, okay? It's not rounded. This is not the surface that we want the arm to contact. It's this surface here, all right? And let me show you a little example I have sitting right here on that. You can see that this limiting bracket has been installed with the arm down the center, and we're contacting this squared surface, not the rounded surface. See how that comes and hits that right there? That's what we want. We don't want to be contacting on this side. We see it all too often where somebody has installed the bracket in this orientation and they're contacting this surface here. That's not what you want. You give yourself a potential dangerous installation that way, okay? Keep that in mind. All right, back to our RV7 bell crank here. So now that we've got this center and we know where that limiting bracket's got to go, we need to install it in one of these holes here. Now, the issue I have with this particular installation is that I can't get that bracket underneath there. This means that I'm going to have to partially uninstall my servo so that I can slip that bracket in there. Now, through the magic of some video editing, I'll be right back with you. Okay, here I am back with you. And you can see I've now installed this bracket in the orientation. And you can, again, I want to emphasize we're stopping on the squared off surfaces, not the round surfaces. Make sure that orientation is correct. So from here, I'm going to install this so that the middle of this bracket is right in the center of that mark that I made earlier. Okay, I'm going to use the provided screws and the tooth lock washer in order to do that. So here we go, put that in there. Now some of you are getting ahead of me and you know what I'm going to say here in just a minute, but let me show it to others. So what I've got here is you can see that the bracket is now crooked on here. And the reason for that is because the servo mounting bracket is interfering with that limiting bracket. Well, we've got a solution for that. We provide you with an AN960-10 washer, and that's going to have to go between our bracket and the servo. Once again, through the magic of video editing, I'll be right back with you. Okay, I'm back with you. Now you can see that I've installed the limiting bracket, and it is now squared up and is no longer crooked with that servo. I've installed that number 10 washer right behind it, and that makes all the difference here in this installation. It makes for a much safer and better installation. So keep that in mind if you have that same situation where you've got a bracket and the limiting bracket is on top of that. A lot of installations are like this installation here where you don't need the number 10 washers, but you can see that I've just added the screw and the locking washer for that. All right, so this is what I would call a good, safe installation right here. We've centered up the amount of the limiting bracket right in the center of our throw with our masking tape, and we've got enough throw here that we're probably hitting the hard stops on the aircraft. Again, I want to emphasize, you can see how if this comes down in this orientation, I'm hitting this square part of this bracket and it's limiting the arm from going over center. There's that word again, over center. So where that is we give you a range of motion of 120 degrees on this servo arm. We do that for your safety. Anything over 120 degrees, you should be hitting the ends of this limiting bracket, hence the word limiting bracket. We do that because in an over-center configuration, you will potentially lock up your servo and create a very hazardous flight situation. Let me show you on this example. Right here, I've got a servo hooked up to a push arm, and you can see if the servo arm is going back and forth and the push rod is going up and down, I'm doing just fine. But let's say that I take this push rod and I move it into this orientation. We now have the push rod that is parallel with this arm. And that's a very dangerous situation right there. We don't want that. What we don't want to see is that now the servo and the control surface can now lock up in flight, and that's a very dangerous situation again. So make sure that you never see this push rod go parallel with that arm. And that's exactly the purpose of this limiting bracket, is that if your push rod comes off at an angle like this, you should see a range of motion somewhere around here, and that hopefully if anything ever breaks or goes wrong, the range of motion bracket is what's going to keep this from going over center. All right? Okay, so let's review one more time before we close out here. I want you to mark the center. I want you to put the limiting bracket in centered over your range of motion. You can use the provided screws and tooth washer. If you have to, you need to put that number 10 washer behind the limiting bracket so that you get a nice square installation like that. Okay? I hope this helps you out. This is David Weber, and you can see more of these tech tip videos linked on our website And from now on, I just want to say, go build.
For more information on planning or capabilities of the Skyview system, please see our website at dynonavionics.com, where you can find links to our system installation guides, pilot user guides, and other valuable information like our user forum. Thank you for watching the Dynon channel.